The Capitol was unusually tense that morning. I had seen my share of courtroom fireworks, but something about today felt heavier. The air buzzed with rumor that Kash Patel had gathered something explosive against New York Attorney General Letitia James. And not just political dirt, something that would shift the ground under her feet. Letitia James had made a career out of high-profile prosecutions. She knew how to grab headlines, how to build pressure in the court of public opinion before the courtroom even opened. But Patel was no ordinary opponent. He was calculated, methodical, and furious. At 9:30 a.m., he stepped into the hearing room with a file under his arm and calm fire in his eyes. No press, no leaks, just a closed-door committee that included members from both sides of the aisle, now forced to reckon with what they'd hear. The chair struck the gavel. This oversight session is now in order. Letitia James was already seated, her chin raised, eyes narrowed. Patel didn't bother with a long opening. "This isn't political vengeance," he said. "This is about what happens when someone weaponizes their office for personal ambition, and goes too far." Then he opened the file. What followed stunned the room. Kash Patel slid a thick stack of documents across the table toward the committee members. "These are internal memos," he said, "from Letitia James' own office, obtained legally through a whistleblower and verified by independent counsel. They show a deliberate pattern of targeting political opponents based not on evidence, but on headlines." A low murmur spread through the chamber. Letitia James didn't flinch, but her attorney leaned in, whispering urgently. Patel continued, his tone razor-sharp. "Here's one dated February 14th, a meeting where James allegedly said, and I quote, 'We don't need a conviction. We need coverage.' That's not prosecution. That's public theater." He held up a second document, highlighted in yellow. "This one outlines directives to prioritize cases involving specific individuals who were seen as political threats, despite internal assessments showing insufficient evidence for pursuit. One of those individuals was me." Letitia James leaned forward. "That's not what those memos say," she snapped. Patel turned his gaze toward her. "Then explain why 3 career prosecutors resigned from your office within 2 months of that memo, all citing ethical conflicts." Gasps echoed from the gallery. A few committee members glanced uncomfortably at each other. One even began scribbling notes furiously. Patel didn't stop. "You took it too far," he said. "You thought no one would look behind the curtain. But now the curtain's gone, and so is the shield you were hiding behind." Silence hung in the room like a verdict. Letitia James stood up slowly, clearly rattled now. Her voice was still composed, but the confidence behind it had thinned. "Mr. Patel," she said, "this committee knows well that whistleblowers can be motivated by resentment. These documents lack context. You're painting a picture you want them to see." Kash didn't blink. "I didn't paint anything. You wrote it, and now the whole country will read it." He turned to the committee chair. "Permission to submit full copies to the congressional record?" The chair nodded slowly. "Granted." Letitia's legal team leaned into each other. Quiet panic. This wasn't a political clash anymore, it was a legal minefield, and Patel had just handed them a map of every misstep. Then Patel dropped the final hammer. "We also have audio." That word, audio, cracked the air open. James' lead counsel immediately stood up. "Chairman, we object to the admission of any alleged recordings that have not been vetted by our office or the appropriate legal authorities." But the damage had been done. Kash pulled a small flash drive from his coat pocket. "In that file," he said, "is a recording of Ms. James in a private meeting, admitting that her investigation into me and several others was a political move designed to keep the narrative going through the election cycle. She thought no one would ever hear it." Letitia James abruptly grabbed her papers and walked out of the room without a word. The gallery erupted. One senator muttered, "That may be it for her." Patel didn't smile. He simply sat down, folded his hands, and waited. By the time Letitia James left the chamber, the temperature in the room had dropped 10 degrees. The committee chair, visibly shaken, leaned toward the mic. "Mr. Patel, is this recording authenticated?" "Yes," Patel replied without hesitation. "Voice match analysis confirmed. Time stamped. Location verified." He handed over the flash drive to the clerk, who relayed it to the AV tech team. Within moments, the room darkened slightly, and the speakers clicked on. A quiet shuffle. Then Letitia's unmistakable voice filled the chamber. "Look, I don't care what the file says. Patel's tied to Trump, and that's all voters need to know. If we keep him tangled in litigation, it keeps the pressure on. That's strategy." There was a stunned silence. Then another voice, a staffer, cautiously asking, "But, what if the case falls apart?" And James, laughing lightly, "By then, it won't matter. We'll have already won the news cycle." A collective gasp rippled across the room. Several committee members looked genuinely horrified. This wasn't strategy, this was manipulation of justice for political gain, admitted in her own voice. The chair leaned into the mic again. "Mr. Patel, are there more recordings?" "Yes," he said. "This is only one of 3. The others go deeper. They involve active coordination with campaign donors and media outlets to synchronize messaging, even before indictments were filed." A committee member blurted, "You're telling us indictments were drafted, based on optics?" Patel looked him straight in the eye. "I'm telling you this wasn't justice. It was a coordinated takedown, and Letitia James used her office like a weapon." The recording ended. Nobody moved. The room, now dead silent, felt like it had been punched in the chest. What had started as a heated oversight hearing had just turned into a full-blown crisis. The committee chair finally spoke, his voice grave. "We will enter the recordings into the congressional record and forward them to the Department of Justice for immediate review." Letitia James' seat remained empty. Kash Patel stayed seated, his hands calm on the desk. No gloating. No smirk. Just quiet resolve. A junior congresswoman leaned forward, barely above a whisper. "Is it true she coordinated media stories with donors?" Patel nodded. "One of the upcoming recordings includes her in a strategy call. They discuss leaking select case details to a political PAC in exchange for ad buys targeting opponents. That's not just unethical. That's criminal." Another congressman shook his head. This is going to blow the lid off everything." Cameras were still off, but that wouldn't last. News was already leaking. Phones buzzed like hornets around the room. Staffers began texting frantically. Someone from the press gallery slipped out, whispering into a headset. The chair slammed the gavel. "This session is now recessed. A special counsel referral is under consideration." Patel rose, buttoned his jacket, and turned to leave. Before he reached the door, a voice stopped him. It was Representative Diaz, a centrist known for keeping quiet in storms. "You just took down a titan," he said, half in awe. "But what made you go this far?" Patel paused, then looked back. "She crossed the line. And I don't care how powerful someone thinks they are, the truth still matters." He walked out into the corridor, leaving behind only silence and chaos. By the time Kash Patel stepped outside the Capitol, the story had already gone nuclear. Cameras flashed from every angle. Reporters pushed microphones into his face. News banners were already plastered with headlines: "Letitia James caught on tape, political targeting exposed, breaking, whistleblower docs implicate New York AG in coordinated smear campaign, Kash Patel unleashes bombshell, DOJ confirms review underway." He didn't say much, just enough. The American people deserve justice that's blind. Not justice that's bought, pressured, or hijacked by political ambition. Inside James' Manhattan office, panic had erupted. Staff were instructed to say nothing. Her official spokesperson issued a brief, defensive statement, "These allegations are false, misleading, and a desperate distraction." The Attorney General remains focused on her work for the people of New York. But it was already too late. Cable news played the recording on loop. Analysts dissected every word. Legal experts, even on left-leaning panels, admitted, this isn't something you spin away. Then came the leak no one saw coming, a resignation letter from one of James' former top deputies. Dated months ago. It included a quiet but damning line, "I can no longer serve in an office that has blurred the line between prosecution and politics." And just like that, Letitia James wasn't fighting just one man anymore. She was fighting public opinion. Internal rebellion. Federal scrutiny. And now, bipartisan outrage. Kash Patel stood on the Capitol steps, watching the press spiral, and said to a nearby aide, "She built her career on takedowns. She never thought she'd be the headline." Within 48 hours, the Department of Justice announced what many thought would never happen: a special counsel has been appointed to investigate the conduct of Attorney General Letitia James and her office regarding potential abuses of power, misconduct, and violations of prosecutorial ethics. The announcement hit like a thunderclap. Letitia James had been untouchable for years, praised by networks, protected by party lines, and feared by political opponents. But now, her name was in the same sentence as federal investigation. Kash Patel wasn't celebrating. He was already 2 steps ahead. Behind closed doors, he met with congressional allies to prepare formal ethics complaints and file an official request for the New York State Bar to review James' license. "This isn't about revenge," he told them. "It's about making sure no one ever uses public office like this again." Meanwhile, protests began forming outside James' offices, some defending her, others demanding her resignation. She hadn't been seen publicly since walking out of that hearing. Her legal team, reportedly, had gone into full lockdown. Then came another twist. One of the journalists previously known to receive leaks from James' office broke rank. In a lengthy column, she confirmed that certain stories had been planted with strategic timing, suggested narratives, passed quietly from staffers who had clear political agendas. The media, once an echo chamber for James' initiatives, began to fracture. Some doubled down in her defense. Others turned their focus to the growing paper trail Patel had exposed. And in the midst of it all, Patel released a statement: "This isn't the end. This is just what accountability looks like when someone finally says, enough. She took it too far. Now it's over." The political walls around Letitia James began to buckle, not from the outside, but from within. Several members of her own party, under mounting pressure, issued carefully worded statements. Senator Caldwell, a longtime ally, said on national TV, "We must hold even our closest colleagues to the highest ethical standards. If the evidence continues to mount, I would support a full investigation, and appropriate consequences." Behind the scenes, New York legislators convened an emergency ethics panel. Multiple subpoenas were issued within 72 hours. Patel's documentation was now being cross-examined not only by federal authorities but state watchdogs. And then, the leak that changed everything. An anonymous insider, later confirmed to be a former investigator in James' office, released an email chain between James and 2 media consultants. The subject line read, "Shaping the narrative." One line in her email echoed like a death knell: "If we hit Patel and his allies with enough legal friction, we can control the airwaves and force them to play defense until November." The email was time-stamped just days before she launched an investigation into Patel and 2 others on her unofficial watch list. That night, Patel appeared on national television. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't grandstand. "This isn't about me. This is about everyone she steamrolled because she thought the ends justified the means. We don't destroy lives for political theater. We uphold the law. And right now, that law is pointing directly at her." Letitia James issued no comment. But her silence spoke volumes. Her staff started leaving. Donors backed away. Former supporters went dark. And in a private call leaked the next morning, one senior strategist said it plainly, "She's not just losing control of the narrative, she's losing everything." Letitia James' downfall wasn't sudden, it was surgical. The special counsel moved swiftly, issuing subpoenas for financial records, internal emails, even surveillance logs from her office building. The investigation expanded into campaign finance violations and potential obstruction. Every hour brought a new revelation. A second whistleblower came forward, a digital forensics analyst who had worked under contract with James' team. He confirmed metadata tampering on official case files to delay evidence disclosures and manipulate timelines. That alone was a federal offense. Meanwhile, Patel's presence in Washington became symbolic. He wasn't just a political figure anymore, he had become a catalyst. In hearings, pundits, and headlines across the country, the phrase, "Patel effect," started trending, shorthand for what happens when truth, preparation, and fearlessness meet unchecked corruption. But while the media circled James, Patel stayed laser-focused. He worked quietly with legal ethics boards, congressional staff, and even victims of politically motivated prosecutions who had been silenced. One case in particular stood out, a small business owner in Buffalo who had been dragged into a public legal battle by James' office after refusing to donate to a PAC aligned with her campaign. The charges were quietly dropped months ago. Now, Patel was helping him get his life back, and his story made the front page of the Wall Street Journal. Calls for resignation surged. 3 New York State Assembly members drafted a formal resolution urging James to step down, for the good of the office and the integrity of the system. Still, she refused to speak. That is, until she had no choice. The special counsel issued its first public statement. Preliminary findings indicate multiple violations of legal ethics, prosecutorial misconduct, and potential abuse of office. A formal criminal referral is imminent. Letitia James scheduled a press conference for the following morning. And Kash Patel, watching from his office in D.C., simply said, she thought she was untouchable. But the law doesn't care how loud you are, it only cares what's true. The podium stood alone as a wall of cameras stared back. For the first time in her career, Letitia James stepped up without a smile, without swagger, just silence and a folded statement in her hand. Reporters leaned forward. The nation held its breath. She began, effective immediately, "I am stepping aside as Attorney General of the state of New York." Gasps echoed across the room. But she wasn't done. "I will cooperate fully with all investigations, and I do not wish for my presence to distract from the important work of this office. I maintain that my actions were within the bounds of my duty, but I recognize that trust has been shaken." It was the closest thing to an admission anyone would get. Within hours, the governor's office announced an interim appointment. The DOJ confirmed the formal criminal referral. Bar associations opened reviews into her license. Civil cases, dormant until now, were reignited. Letitia James had fallen. And not in secret, but in full view of the American public. Kash Patel watched the press conference alone, arms crossed, expression unreadable. This wasn't a victory parade. It was justice. Long overdue. Later that night, he was asked by a journalist, "You've become the man who brought down one of the most powerful AGs in the country. How does it feel?" He paused. "It's not about bringing anyone down. It's about reminding people that power doesn't make you right. Accountability does." He turned and walked away, no press team, no speechwriters, just a man who stood his ground when the system pushed too far. Letitia James had taken it too far. And now, it really was over.